Fear stops us from achieving our true greatness. Are you a professional woman who is feeling stuck, unmotivated, or burned out? Are you worried about your wellness? Are you letting fear stop you from crushing your goals? If you answered yes to any or all of these, then this is the podcast for you. Dr. Charmaine Gregory, night shift emergency physician, burnout thriver, and wellness champion, along with everyday heroes just like you, will explore how to face fear in our lives and emerge victoriously.
Hey, Fearless Freedom fam, Dr. G. Oh my goodness, it has been such a really cool week this week. I made a commitment to do some more live broadcasts on Facebook and then uploading them to YouTube. So if you have not already subscribed to the YouTube channel, which is Charmaine Gregory MD, please go ahead and do that. If you have also not checked out my Facebook page, I am at Charmaine Gregory there as well. And check it. We have a Facebook page for the podcast now, which I literally just put together maybe a couple of weeks ago and working on getting that to be more amped up. I'm trying to do more and more live broadcasts on that as well. Just information about podcasting and other fun stuff, sharing pertinent podcasts that I come across that I feel like will be helpful to you as a tribe. So check those out. And of course, thank you for tuning in every week, for being such an amazing group, and for sending in your comments and sending in your questions. And thank you for subscribing to the podcast, sharing it with your friends, leaving a 5-star rating, and a positive comment. I appreciate each and every one of those, because what that does is it basically helps the podcast to be heard by more and more people. And if more hear about it, guess what? The Fearless Freedom Tribe grows. More of us benefit from hearing the stories of those who come on the show and talk about their fears and how they face it. So, oh my gosh, there's been so many great guests that have been on the lineup, and I have been super excited about the fact that I have a ton of recordings that have been done and are just waiting to be released. Oh my gosh, so many. And I am also very excited about the fact that the podcasting launch course is still in effect. I am going to be running a couple more webinars talking about that and talking about whether or not podcasting is right for you and how you can utilize podcasting to amplify your brand, get more leads, get more customers, get more clients, get more patients. And then last but not least, check out the website and the webinars at podcastinglaunch.com. So if this is of interest to you, maybe you think it is, if you're sitting on that fence and you're afraid about getting going with your podcast, remember the course is going to be able to help you to get your first 5 episodes done, your show art, your logo, everything you need for a fantastic and successful launch, and a fantastic and successful podcasting career where you're going to be able to educate your tribe, broadcast to your audience where they are, as well as acquire leads, customers, and clients. So check it out, podcastinglaunch.com. Okay, so hope to see you guys in the webinar. And then for the other side of things, I just again want to say thank you. I am obviously not facing my current fear of public speaking through getting on stages, but there have been some blessings because you guys, I got an opportunity to be a part of other people's podcasts as a guest, as well as be a part of 2 virtual summits. So these are ways in which, even though I'm not able to get on a stage in front of people, I'm allowing myself to still be able to face my fear of public speaking by getting on virtual platforms. So I say all this to say that I am such a proponent of pivoting and making sure that even if times are rough, you should still be thinking about ways in which you can face the things that you need to face, get the job done, and however you need to do that. So just want to encourage and inspire and let you guys know what I'm up to. Last but not least, today we have a really cool guest on the show. You know, we always bring it. and her name is Julie Kratz, and we get into some really great discussion, some stuff that maybe we don't always talk about because it's a little uncomfortable, but check it out. Hello, Fearless Freedom family. We have an amazing guest today, and we always bring it. Today, we have the absolutely fantastic Julie Kratz. Julie, do you want to tell the audience all about you and what you're up to?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Well, I am a speaker and trainer that spends a lot of time inside the walls of corporate America and conferences focused on diversity and inclusion and gender equality. So, those are the hot topics that I get to wrestle with and help facilitate some good conversation around. Before starting my own speaking business, close to 6 years ago, I had a corporate America career of my own. I like to say I served my time, my 12 years there, getting to be a people leader. So I remember what it's like to kind of lead in the trenches and be that middle manager inside the organization. And I always love the people development side. So that's truly my passion and what I believe is my purpose in life. And now I do it full time in my own business, which is really exciting.
Awesome. Wow. There's a lot to unpack there because you mentioned those hot topics and they are actually pretty hot and pretty controversial and not easy topics to bring up, particularly in the space of corporate America. How has that been for you?
I know when I hear that, there's kind of like this fear of like, oh, what's she going to say? What's going to happen in this session? I understand it. I mean, I like to meet people where they're at. So there is an initial fear, I think, an initial sting around the conversation of especially jarring words like diversity or gender equality. And the reason that is because no organization has this figured out, right? I think a lot of times, especially, the majority group, which tends to be white male leaders, they'll say things like, well, I'm not a part of this conversation, or I don't want to say or do the wrong thing here. And that's unfortunate because as oftentimes the leaders of organizations, they're really best positioned to help us advance this and to truly drive equality so that all voices can be seen, heard, and feel like they belong inside the organization. And I think now more than ever, in a time of tremendous change in corporate America, inclusion and everyone feeling included in the workplace is really going to be a huge competitive advantage for organizations that are starting to figure this out.
Absolutely. And you're correct because a lot of times the leader is the one who sets the pace and the tone. So if you have a leader who is not insightful and is not attuned to what's happening with those that they're leading, that poses a huge problem.
You're right. Well, and oftentimes we have our own biases, the B word that everyone's kind of afraid of too. We just naturally, as humans, kind of prefer to surround ourselves with people that are kind of like us. And oftentimes that means people that look like us, that think like us, that behave like us, that went to similar schools to us, that are from the same part of the country as us. We just gravitate towards familiarity. And I think it's important to know, especially for corporate America leaders today, that while it's the natural inclination and kind of your safe space, that safety net, you're going to learn so much more by surrounding yourself by different types of people. As someone myself, I've taken a look in inventory of my network and honestly, a few years into my own diversity and inclusion business, I thought, wow, I can do better than this. And being on that journey of really trying to reach out and engage with different types of people, whether that's the podcasts I'm on, the people I collaborate with, really making sure that they're not like me and not just physically not like me, not just gender and race, but that they have different experiences, different backgrounds that I'm going to learn from, right? Why would I want to be around people like me that I just know what I know? It's so much more fun to learn what other people know.
That's so true. Yeah, it makes for a richer experience, right? It's kind of like the analogy of traveling, right? Because when you're in your own little parochial area and you just, you're born there, you live there your whole life, and I'm not knocking this, but I'm just saying the expansion of your mind happens when you move to other areas and you experience other humans, and you start to learn that the same thing that you may be doing can be done differently, can be looked at in a different light, can be, effectively completed in a different way. So, that just really expands your mind. It expands your perspective versus if you're, like you said, if you're kind of in a situation where you're surrounded by everyone who's like you, they've done everything just the way you have, they have had exact same experiences you have, then that's limiting your ability to really experience difference, right? Because with that, we get enrichment. With that, we get perspective broadening, and we just are better human beings. You're more of a Renaissance person if you talk to other people who do things differently. You just are. So I think a lot of times we don't realize that. We tend to just want to be comfortable, and then we want to rely on the perceptions that are provided to us, perhaps even by people who are not even experienced in that particular area or experienced integrally with that particular group of people. So it's just a weird thing.
It is. It is. And you mentioned one of the tools I offer is traveling. Now that might be on hiatus for some time, but I mean, I think in a normal circumstance, kind of when things reset, traveling globally, right? Experiencing different cultures as an observer and not as a judger. It's like, why did they do it that way? I remember I spent 4 months studying abroad in Europe and went all over Europe, Eastern Europe, Western Europe, and literally me in a backpack by myself at hostels. And it was so fascinating. I would seek out the most different person and try to talk to them. And I just remember like how much more I learned by putting myself in a really somewhat uncomfortable position because I didn't know what they were going to talk about, what their experience had been, how they felt about Americans, which at the time wasn't great.
Right.
It's just, it takes some risk taking. But when you're truly curious and you listen to learn, as oftentimes when we talk about allies in the workplace and how to be there for somebody that's different than you, when you practice this, you realize like, I might be being helpful here, but I'm actually the one getting the gift of learning here.
Right.
So I'm actually getting better as a result of this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I'm definitely with you in the travel situation. I mean, I'm not I'm not originally born in America. So I had the advantage early on in life of exploring and going to other places other than the place where I was born. And it really makes how you approach situations, how you interact with other people, just very different. It's very different. So the bottom line is definitely encourage you when you get an opportunity to travel, that you definitely travel and just experience other people. It doesn't have to be a far place that you go to. You literally can go to the next state or the next province, or you can literally go to the next town. You'd be surprised what you can learn even from those experiences.
Yep.
So, you have so many incredible things going on. Can you tell us a little bit more about your book and what that's about?
Yeah. So I've written a few books now since starting my business Next Pivot Point. And, initially I kind of started out in a bit of a safer place for me around gender equality, specifically tackling gender in the workplace and women's leadership. So I wrote Pivot Point, how to build a winning career game plan for women, which, I think your audience, if you're kind of wrestling with what's next in your career, it's a self-guided, do-it-yourself journaling kind of technique to go from everything to, authenticity to confidence to building that game plan, which we know men are just kind of naturally more inclined to do though. So and self-promote and all sorts of things.
The self-promotion thing particularly.
Right. Yeah. And women, it's not that we can't do it. It's not that we don't want to do it. It's just perceived differently. And we're socialized to kind of hold back our whole childhood. So when we enter the workforce, just flipping on the man switch isn't necessarily something that we do, and nor should we. So it has to come from an authentic place.
Right.
Then I wrote about allyship in the workplace. So I talk a lot about men as allies for women. So again, gender-focused work that I did about 3 years ago. And that book's called One. But the one I'm really excited about that's coming out here this spring is about lead like an ally, and it's really tackling the overall umbrella of diversity and inclusion and what it means to be somebody different inside an organization. Again, whether that's you look different, behave different, just come at things differently, everyone's been in a situation where you're like, I kind of stick out here.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And unfortunately, for underrepresented people, again, women, those in the LGBTQ community, those that I don't identify as white being their race, when you fall outside those majority group categories, you do feel like the only one a lot of times in corporate America settings. And it's interesting, when I share that, again, with a majority group, white males, they'll say like, I didn't even know. Like, I didn't know that was a thing. I've never felt like the only one. Like,
right.
That's your privilege talking. But I think once you understand that, it's not, you're not the problem. Like, no, you did not ask to be born a certain way.
Right, exactly.
The systems are built to support a certain type of person and keep a certain type of person up and a certain type of person down. And so the new book is really tools to kind of meet, again, this middle manager, the one that's basically representing the entire employee experience inside an organization.
That sounds awesome.
Making all the decisions. How can they be an ally? How can they be more inclusive? And that it's baby steps. It's just breadcrumbs.
Okay. No, that's great. We need to have that implemented because, like you said, I don't think that anybody sets out to be, not an ally or not inclusive.
Right.
Oftentimes it's just the socialization, right? Because if you're a category of person and you're hanging out with the same category of person, you're going to be oblivious to the experiences of another category of persons. So
true.
Yeah, it's a very strange phenomenon. It's almost like we're living like in parallel universes, and then it's not until we intersect in one particular space that it becomes evident that there's a problem with that. Like you should
exactly
get insight into. We should have some intersection that is before we get to the point where we have to work together. We have to basically team up with each other. And if we don't have good understanding of each other, then that poses a huge problem in the progress of the team or in the progress of the work. So yeah, no, I am super excited that you are doing this work because I feel like it is a big job because there's a lot of it that needs to get done, but definitely appreciate your contribution. And then the fact that you're putting it into a evergreen type of format through the books is also extremely helpful. So thank you for doing that.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for being an ally in this work. One thing you said, Charmaine, is it's hard to see something you haven't experienced yourself.
Yes.
So I think this lends a lens of empathy to the conversation that's so important. So for our listeners, just think about for 1 minute. I mean, you can't really put yourself in someone else's shoes. I'm not a fan of that analogy because it's like I can't fit in someone else's shoes.
Right, exactly.
But if I were to imagine what it's like to be somebody else, or more importantly, spend time with somebody that's drastically different than myself and just see the world through their eyes for a day, it's amazing. I'd read a book, White Fragility, that truly changed how I looked at everything from a racial perspective. Yeah, so I go to the bank, I go to the grocery store, I go to my child's school, and everyone kind of looks like me. I fit in pretty easily as a white woman. And it's hard for me to see that from another vantage point, right? And so if you are a person of color, if you are somebody that identifies different on the gender spectrum, in non-binary or, in a transgender identification, whatever it is, that's not going to be your experience. And so I think once I understood that, oh, wow, I'm reflected a lot in the environments of which I live, I realized people that aren't reflected in their environments and are the only in everyday settings, that's harder, right? And I hadn't seen that myself. So it was hard to understand that experience until I really, really thought about it from those other vantage points.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting about that and that whole concept, because like if you were to go to a country where most of the people look the same, you would stand out and you would be the only, right? So say, for example, if you went to, let me think of what country now. Okay, so say you went to Peru, you would stand out in Peru. Like you would look
Mm-hmm.
different than the average Peruvian. You know what I mean? And so,
Mm-hmm.
but we don't have the opportunity to really step into that space because we're not in a situation where we're gonna, like where you'd be able to be the only in a particular scenario amongst the people that are there. So no, I think it's awesome that you read that book and it really shed light on that. Um, I can't, it's hard to like explain that if you're in a situation like myself, for example, African American female. So, it's like you go to the store and people look at you differently in the store.
Yeah.
If my son were to go to the store, he'd be looked at differently. He has some additional concerns when he's out and about that, a kid shouldn't really have to have just because of his skin. So
Mm-hmm.
there are so many things that I don't know. I didn't read the book, so I don't know exactly what it says, but there's so many things that it's really, really difficult to convey because, they're hard things. They're hard things and they're things that really shouldn't happen or shouldn't exist. But the main reason why these things happen are because there are a lot of people who aren't even willing to pick up a book like that.
Yeah.
And they aren't even willing to have an open mind about someone or people who are different from them. And then they
Yeah.
choose to make judgments based on information that's fed to them, which again, could be derived from people who have never experienced the group, have never really had, direct contact with the group, but just extrapolate as to what the group should behave like or
Yeah.
what the group should be like. So no, I would say definitely kudos to you to reading the book and coming to the insightful, objectives or insightful points and ideas that came from the book, right? Because it starts with asking the question and then trying to relate to the experience. But if
Mm.
you've never asked a question and you've never considered the experience and just made assumptions, that's when the problem lies.
You're
You know what I mean?
so right. That's how our brains are wired, to categorize and make assumptions, right? And the things that we don't even know to be true, like what your son's experiencing, is likely people's biases. And the word, the title of the book that I do recommend to everyone to read, people of any race. White fragility really just means the fear of talking about race, especially for white people. And so, to your point, a lot of people will say, like, oh, this isn't an issue anymore. Slavery's been over for a really long time. Or, we'd like to kind of whitewash the whole thing. And so,
Absolutely. Yeah.
I know you talk a lot about fear on your podcast and overcoming fear. I think there's a real fear there of, oh boy, like that's a really big topic. That sounds scary. I don't want to deal with it. And that's actually your privilege talking if you feel that way, because people of color, what they tell me is, I don't have a choice. I
No, you
have
don't. You
to
don't have
talk
a
about
choice. Or
this,
if you're
right?
Latino, you have no choice. So
No.
yeah, absolutely.
So just recognizing some people don't get that choice. And in the conversations, especially, I've gotten really passionate about this topic and launched a new podcast called Inclusion School with a friend that is African American. And we talk a lot about the conversations we have with our kids. And, she'll say, well, I don't I don't have a choice. I need to talk about Black History Month. I need to talk about Martin Luther King. You know, you get to decide to do that. And she doesn't say it in a confrontational
Right.
way.
No, I get
Like,
it.
it's just,
Yeah.
it's your choice. You don't have to.
Exactly.
And then I'll do it, and it'll be a really scary conversation. My kid will ask questions I don't know the answers to. And I'm like, this is why we don't do this. So I understand the fear I've experienced myself. And the only way with fear, you know this, right? Is just go at it head
That's
on.
right. Confront it. Yes,
Go
indeed.
through it.
That's right. That's right. That's absolutely right. So did you say you started a new podcast?
Yeah. So I have one that I've had for a few years, the Pivot Point podcast, which is all about diversity and inclusion, allyship, being an ally in the workplace. So it's more of a corporate audience, but the Inclusion School is for parents, caregivers, and educators. So we're just a dozen or so episodes in, but it's
Awesome.
really, so the purpose of Inclusion School is really, to make sure that parents, caregivers, and educators have tools to talk about diversity and inclusion with kids. What we found initially in our research is there's books out there, contrary to a stroll through a public library might tell you, but there are actually a lot of books out there. They may not be in the shelves of your child's classroom either.
Right.
But when you do some digging and do your research, but it's a lot of work. And as parents and caregivers, educators, we've got a lot vying for our time. So my co-host, Simone Morris, and I, our goal is to really provide resources, discussion guides, good book lists, good activities, simple conversation starters with your educators and with your kids about this topic. And we're learning as we go. I mean, as far as 2020 goes, it's been my biggest area of growth is continuing to be curious about this and
Right.
to get fear head on of like, oh, I don't know how this is going to go, but just go through it. So it's exciting.
Wow, that sounds like a wonderful show. That's definitely going to be in the show notes, you guys. So that say the name of it again one more time.
Yeah, it's The Inclusion School.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it.
Inclusionschool.com. You can subscribe to all the stuff, and it's on iTunes and all the places you can find podcasts.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that's valuable because like you said, if it's not available easily, because even you are saying that you're having some difficulty finding some of the resources. So that sounds like an incredibly helpful show that lots of parents and caregivers can benefit from. So yeah, no, thank you for doing that. Mm-hmm. And what did you say your co-host's name was?
Her name's Simone Morris. So
Simone
she
Morris.
is also a speaker and a coach on the East Coast. So it's fun. We get to compare notes from different geographies, different racial backgrounds, different experiences. So by all means, by all stretches of diversity, we're experiencing it ourselves.
Oh, that is great. That is great. Awesome. Absolutely great. And then, so, we talked about several things today. We talked about, the fear that is potentially the root of us not wanting to accept diversity or even start learning about diversity. We talked about some of the fears that go into, accepting and exploring, putting yourself out there and becoming uncomfortable so that you can grow, so that you can learn. And then we talked about your awesome book that will allow for allies to be made and forged and lean, so they can lean into the process and get some baby steps and some conversation starters going. And then we just talked about this awesome, we talked about your podcast, the initial one, Pivot Point, but the one that you've just started sounds very interesting. And so we definitely talked about that. So that was fantastic. Is there any fear? And so you talked about some of the things that you're working on right now and the growth that you've experienced through doing the Inclusion School. Is there any particular fear that you are working on right now that we have not discussed?
Oh, yeah, fear is everywhere. So it's been interesting kind of going through all of the changes that 2020 has brought us early on. And one of my biggest fears that I'm still wrestling with is just being a business owner right now in a really uncertain environment. And, just making sure that as a primary breadwinner for my family, that we have enough, to be provided for, to be taken care of.
Absolutely.
But also what does success look like in times of uncertainty? And I think, excuse me, is sometimes it can be really hard to take your goals on your whiteboard and kind of look at them and be like, well, maybe this isn't going to happen this year. And I'm always wanting to look at the positive side and what is possible and get through obstacles. But in reality, I looked at that number for several weeks and I thought that, there's just no way. And it's giving me such anxiety about having to do so much to make up the second half of the year, what happened the first half of the year. And it's not fair. It's not fair that this happened. I didn't do anything. COVID is just mean thing that I just want to kick,
Right. Well, I mean, it's honest. It's real.
Right. But on the other side of that is, okay, maybe my number that was going to be I was really proud of, maybe that number is going to be dialed back a little bit. And I felt so much better just taking my whiteboard and just revisiting that. And recognizing it already accomplished one of the goals to do a TED Talk this year. That was a big goal of mine.
Oh,
And
awesome. Congrats.
thanks. I got that done right before everything happened.
Oh, well, that's a blessing right there.
I'm so thankful for that. So, and that's a big lesson, I think, on fear is it's looking at the positives, choosing to look at the gains over just the losses and taking an honest inventory and make sure that those fears aren't taking over. That negative space isn't getting that dark cloud in your brain,
Right,
over
right.
that positive space. So revisiting my goals, rewriting my goals has really helped me intentionally pivot forward. And I'll tell you, like the world, the positive karma that comes from the world. I just had a signed contract for a speaking engagement come through this very morning. And
Oh, awesome.
You got to think like I'm, it's somewhat serendipitous, but I do believe in positive energy around that of, okay, let's reset. What is this going to look like for 2020? And I'm sure a lot of your listeners are wrestling with that. Like, how do we reset for 2020? Reset something that's realistic, still challenging, that you feel excited about again. And that's helping me work through, especially these times of uncertainty.
Wow. Love it. I am a huge believer in karma, and I talk about this a lot. People are like, what is wrong with you? But I honestly believe that if you put out positive energy, you're going to get it back in spades. Like you just will. And so, yeah, you're right. I mean, if you can cast that negative energy away and just welcome positive, then that's when you start seeing the doors open. You start seeing opportunities that you didn't see before. It just makes all the difference. And it's hard. It is hard, when things don't look the way that you thought they should or you thought they would, and you have to make adjustments and you have to course correct. That is never easy. But sometimes when you course correct, it's actually taking you away from the course that was going to lead you down the less fruitful path. So if you kind of look at it like that, everything does happen for a reason. And, you may not see the reason at the moment that you're going through the hardship, but you can always look back and say, wow, okay, that's the reason why that happened. So that I could be in a better place now than I was then. So yeah, no, it's real. And congratulations on that contract. That's pretty awesome. And the TED Talk too. That's absolutely awesome because that's evergreen content. It's going to be out there and shared and shared and shared and viewed and making impact greatly, much more than one-time occurrence of you speaking to somebody. So that's awesome.
Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, no, thank you for sharing. I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing with us and the audience. Because, I love talking to people on the show because it just really gets so many great pearls about how we all look at fear, how we all look at the approach to it. And, hearing your story, it just really, it really speaks to me, speaks to my heart. I know it speaks to several people who are listening. So I definitely appreciate you sharing.
I appreciate what you do. It's so important to have these positive messages now, again, in times of uncertainty. Having these voices that can help us wrestle with our fears is so, so critical. So thank you for the work that you do.
Awesome. Yeah, we're good together. See, look at that.
Stronger together, just like allies.
That's right. There you go. There you go. So we're at that, and I wish we could continue talking for a lot longer, but we're at that point in the show where we're going to do our 3 fill in the blanks. Do you think you're ready, Julie? Ready for that?
Bring it.
All right, sweet. Love it. Love the attitude. It's great. All right. So the first one is, to me, fearless freedom means...
Fearless freedom to me means letting go. And what I mean by that is not to get that Disney song in your head.
I know. I was just like, wait.
I have been watching Frozen 2 quite a bit lately with my daughter. But letting go of those self-limiting thoughts, oftentimes what's kicking around in our brain, that natural amygdala firing fear, is not real. And we're oftentimes holding ourselves back. Like you said, positive energy meets positive energy. When we have negative energy, it attracts negative energy. So making sure that we're looking at those fears, those self-limiting thoughts, and letting them go so that we can make room for the positive energy to fill that space.
Absolutely. So now the next one is, if I am fearless, I will.
If I am fearless, I will take risks. And as somebody that has not always been a risk taker, admittedly, I was very fearful growing up, a very introverted child and very shy. Until I want to say my corporate career, I kind of learned to come out of my.
So you were saying that you were an introverted child, and then it wasn't until you started your corporate career that you learned to come out of.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect.
That's where you landed.
I'm sorry for the extra editing, Charmaine.
No, that's fine.
So I was very shy until coming into the corporate space. Oddly enough, I really had to come out of my shell and learn to take risks, and wanting to be more risk averse, take the safe route, do the things that everyone wanted me to do only took me so far. And eventually when I started Next Pivot Point, my business, I had to take on risk. I mean, that was the biggest risk I'd ever taken, probably still to this day, a huge risk. But your tolerance for risk grows. When you take that big jump, it teaches you, I did that. I can do another one, right? I can take small risks now as a result of having taken that big risk. So learning to take risks has been a huge part of overcoming fear.
Wow. Yes. As you're talking about taking risks, I'm like, yeah, exactly. You have me going there. And then last but not least, my battle cry is...
My battle cry. So if I look around my office, I'm a big believer in positive affirmations and surrounding yourself with positive things. So I have my vision board. I've got some quotes. And one of my favorites is my sister got this for me. It says, "Don't forget to be awesome today." And, it's one of those things that kind of blends into the background, but I'll look at it from time to time, be like, that's right. Don't forget to be awesome today. So I'd say that's my battle cry.
Love it. Now that's very empowering and very encouraging, So I'm sure that when you're, having a moment and you look around your office, and that one, even though it blends in, does pop out subconsciously or consciously. So no, that's awesome. That is awesome. So, let me know. Can you just tell the listeners just once here how they can reach out to you? I forgot we didn't do this. Yeah. Just what your contacts are.
The best place to find me is at nextpivotpoint.com. There you can find videos, our podcasts, free resources to get you started on your pivot point or to start this conversation with your organization. You can also email me directly. Questions, stories, ideas, Julie@nextpivotpoint.com. I personally respond to every message I get, usually the same day. And then I post daily on LinkedIn. So if we're not connected there, search for me, Julie Kratz, Kratz. I post every day about this topic.
Awesome. Fantastic.